China builds more bridges than any other country in the world. And these aren't ordinary bridges. Some span distances longer than Manhattan, others stand taller than skyscrapers, and many carry entire high-speed rail networks across gorges so deep you'd need a minute to watch a stone hit the bottom. But in the past year and a half, 3 of these mega bridges have failed. One collapsed 7 months after opening, despite an advanced monitoring system that detected the problem and saved lives. Another failed during construction in the middle of the night, killing 12 workers and collapsing just days before its scheduled opening. A third was swept away during a 2024 flood, taking 38 people with it. 3 bridges, 3 very different failures. But here's the question: is there anything that connects them? And more importantly, what does it mean for a country that's built more infrastructure in 2 decades than most nations build in a century? Before we can get into what went wrong, you need to understand the scale of what China's attempting. By 2023, China had grown from 279,000 road bridges in 2000 to 1.08 million, an increase of about 800,000 bridges. That's approximately 95 bridges completed every single day for 23 years. Take the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge, a 55-kilometer sea crossing that includes the world's longest immersed tunnel, diving 40 meters below the seabed. It took approximately 8 years to complete, with innovations in modular construction that hadn't been tried at this scale before. Or the Baipanjiang Bridge, standing 565 meters above a limestone gorge, nearly twice the height of the Eiffel Tower, built in just 4 years. Then there's the Danyang-Kunshan Grand Bridge, stretching almost 165 kilometers along the Beijing-Shanghai high-speed rail line. It's the longest bridge on Earth, carrying trains at 350 kilometers per hour. Construction time? 4 years with 10,000 workers. This has become normal for China. They've built so many bridges over the past 2 decades that they casually finish building a bridge in 3 to 4 years. But that speed isn't just about efficiency, it's a necessity. 60% of China's landmass is mountains, plateaus, and hills. Over 1,500 major river crossings are needed just to connect cities, and a large portion sits in high-probability seismic zones. So building large numbers of bridges and building them fast isn't optional. But with that ambition comes risk. And that risk is now becoming impossible to ignore. The 3 recent failures were the mainstream infrastructure on routes millions depend on. The Hongqi Bridge sits on the G317 National Highway in Sichuan Province, a 758-meter continuous rigid-frame bridge that's part of the Chengdu-Tibet Corridor. This route is central to China's Western development strategy, linking interior provinces to Tibet. The bridge was built specifically to reroute traffic around a new hydropower reservoir, one of those massive dam projects that China's become known for. It opened in April 2025. The Yellow River Railway Bridge in Qinghai Province was meant to be a showcase, a 1,596-meter steel truss arch carrying double-track railway lines with a 366-meter main span, the world's largest of its type. Part of the Sichuan-Qinghai Railway, this was the kind of structure that announced a country's engineering capabilities to the world. Construction was scheduled to complete by the end of August 2025. The bridge was just days away from opening. The Shanxi Highway Bridge carried the Danning Expressway over the Jinqian River, a 366-meter structure in a flood-prone region. This is exactly the kind of climate-resilient infrastructure engineers are supposed to be designing as extreme weather becomes more frequent. These bridges were carrying traffic, trains, and entire supply chains. And that's what makes understanding their failures critical. To understand what went wrong, we need to look at the engineering challenges. Let's start with the Hongqi Bridge. This bridge was built on sedimentary rock which forms in layers. Those layers have weak surfaces between them called bedding planes. When you dig into the ground to build a bridge foundation, you can disturb these layers. It's like pulling pieces out of a Jenga tower. Remove the wrong one and everything starts sliding. If those weak layers tilt toward the excavation at about 30 to 60 degrees, the ground can slip. Add water from a newly formed reservoir, and that slipping becomes almost guaranteed. The Yellow River Bridge failed during construction. It used a cable-stayed design where sections are built outward from the tower in balance. Temporary cables hold the pieces until the full structure can support itself. These temporary cables can carry more than 1,100 metric tons. During tensioning, everything is highly sensitive. If one cable snaps, the load suddenly jumps to the others. One failure triggers another, then another, until the whole system collapses. This is why temporary structures must be treated as seriously as permanent ones. In this case, the collapse happened at 3:10 a.m. and killed 12 workers. The Shanxi Bridge failed because of scour. When fast water hits a pier, it dives downward and creates a spinning horseshoe vortex at the base. This vortex is much faster than the normal water flow and digs out the riverbed. If the erosion goes deeper than the foundation, the pier starts to lose support. Once part of the footing is exposed, the vortex gets even stronger, eroding the soil even faster. Now add 10 hours of heavy rain, flash flooding and debris hitting the structure. The failure becomes a chain reaction. And it raises a question. Were the flood predictions based on old climate data that no longer fits today's conditions? On November 11, 2025, the Hongqi Bridge collapsed, but its warning systems worked perfectly. Cracks appeared on November 9th. On November 10th at 3 p.m., inspection officials detected road cracks and shifting terrain, prompting immediate closure. The structure fell the next afternoon with 0 casualties. The bridge had been open for only 7 months. On August 22, 2025 at 3:10 a.m., a steel cable snapped during tensioning on the Yellow River Railway Bridge in Qinghai. The 108-meter steel arch collapsed instantly. The bridge was just days from opening. On July 19, 2024, after 10 hours of heavy rain, flash floods hit the Jingqiang River. Debris piled against the Shanxi Highway Bridge piers. At 8:40 p.m., a 40-meter section failed. 25 vehicles flowed into the river. Final toll was 38 confirmed dead and 24 missing. 3 bridges saw 3 very different failures. And for the first time, China's bridge building program is under pressure to answer questions it hasn't faced before. China builds more bridges than the rest of the world combined because of geographic necessity. In 2023 alone, it added 46,100 new bridges. But building at this scale and speed creates 2 types of risks. First, there's construction phase fragility. Even with world-class engineering standards, bridges are most vulnerable during construction. When temporary supports carry loads they weren't designed to hold long-term, when fresh concrete hasn't reached full strength, and when structures haven't yet formed complete load paths. The more you build, the more exposure you have to this inherent risk. But there's a second risk: implementation failures. When timelines are compressed and oversight is stretched thin, gaps can appear between what standards require and what actually happens on site. You can see both patterns in these failures. Construction phase fragility. Hongqi's bridge monitoring system worked perfectly, detecting movement, triggering closure, and preventing casualties. But the structure still failed, likely because geological risks in an active landslide zone weren't fully addressed during the compressed timeline. The Yellow River Bridge collapsed during the critical tensioning phase when temporary cables must hold enormous asymmetric loads. Even with proper design, this is an inherently vulnerable moment. Implementation failures. The Shanxi Bridge investigation revealed a different problem entirely. Investigators found illegal subcontracting, falsified inspection records, and construction that didn't meet standards. 43 officials were punished. This wasn't about construction phase fragility, this was about corners being cut. So the real question isn't whether China can deliver world-class finished bridges. They clearly can. The question is whether compressed timelines and oversight gaps leave enough room for those standards to be consistently applied, and whether monitoring systems can catch problems early enough when geology, weather, or implementation failures create risk. With 90 of the world's 100 highest bridges and over 1 million total road bridges, China faces proportionally greater exposure to risk than any other nation. When you're building at this scale, in terrain more challenging than most countries will ever attempt, some failures become statistically inevitable. But this pattern isn't unique to China. Every major infrastructure boom in history has paid tuition in the form of failures. The Quebec Bridge collapsed twice during construction, killing 88 people total, 75 in the 1907 collapse and 13 in 1916. The failure? Underestimated loads and compression member design flaws. It took 2 catastrophic collapses to establish the cantilever bridge standards we still use today. Tacoma Narrows in 1940 collapsed just 4 months after opening due to aeroelastic flutter, a phenomenon engineers didn't fully understand. That failure created an entirely new field of bridge aerodynamics and made wind tunnel testing mandatory for every major suspension bridge since. The Morandi Bridge in Genoa 2018 killed 43 people. The proprietary cable design trapped moisture, causing corrosion that reduced cable strength by up to 20%. Years of warnings were ignored. That failure proved that innovative structural systems need redundancy, regular inspection, and proper maintenance, not just during construction, but for decades after. The FIU pedestrian bridge in Florida 2018 collapsed during construction when load miscalculations went unaddressed and visible cracks were ignored. 6 people died. It showed that schedule and cost pressure cannot override safety, ever. The real question isn't why is this happening? The question is, what are we learning? The investigations have followed different timelines. The Shanxi Highway Bridge investigation concluded in March 2025 with penalties issued for illegal subcontracting and falsified inspections. For the Yellow River Railway Bridge and Hongqi Bridge, detailed investigation reports are still pending as of November 2025. What's emerging from preliminary assessments is instructive. Geological studies suggest the Hongqi site had pre-existing landslide risks that may not have been fully mitigated before construction began. The Yellow River collapse during cable tensioning raises questions about temporary support safety factors during critical construction phases. The Shanxi failure highlights the ongoing challenge of updating flood models to reflect climate-driven extreme weather that exceeds historical data. This raises a critical question. Even when monitoring systems work perfectly, are we addressing geological risks thoroughly enough during the planning and construction phases? The broader question is whether China will formalize new engineering standards in response. There's speculation about updated requirements for geological studies around reservoirs, stronger temporary support designs for cable-stayed bridges during construction, and climate-adjusted flood models that account for debris impact. But as of now, these remain discussions among engineers rather than official policy changes. What we do know is that China is still building major bridges. The nearly completed Huajiang Canyon Bridge, now the world's highest at 625 meters, shows their engineering capability hasn't dropped. And engineers worldwide will study these 3 failures because they teach crucial lessons about rapid construction, challenging geology, and climate risks that every infrastructure program will face. Every bridge that fails becomes a teacher. Every investigation report becomes a blueprint for building safer. The question isn't whether these failures will change bridge engineering. They already have. The question is whether we'll implement those lessons quickly enough and share them openly to prevent the next collapse. What's your take on these failures? Are compressed timelines worth the risk? Or should infrastructure programs slow down to ensure safety? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you want to see more Megabuild stories, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next one.